Hello and welcome. This is SSAT Middle Level Vocabulary. My name is Rose and I am so excited and happy to meet you finally. And so here today we're going to be talking about the introduction to this specific series that has recently come out, specifically talking about the SSAT Middle Level Vocabulary. Now here we're going to be talking about the vocabulary overview. And so the question then is, what is this series going to be addressing? Well, for us, we would like to emphasize here that it is necessary for understanding verbal, reading, writing sample sections on the SSAT. Noticing here, there are three particular sections of the SSAT that have something to do with the English language. This could be, of course, English reading, English writing, and the latter. So when we're talking about this idea, when we're looking at this, I want us to really kind of keep in mind here that the English portion of this SSAT exam is going to be a very large portion indeed, taking up 3/4 of the exam. This is the reason why I would really like to emphasize here that it is incredibly necessary. And so for this lecture series, we'll be talking about the top 500 words, which are all included specifically for the middle level vocabulary series. Again, this is the middle level, and so this is only part 1 of 2. Additionally, each lecture will have 10 words, and each 10 words will have 6 synonyms each, totaling up to 3,000 plus by the end for this particular set. And once more, we have 40 sample sentences per lecture. We have 4 sentences for each word, and talking about them all, we're going to go through them one by one, really emphasizing here how to use the word and the context and the connotations that we oftentimes see with them. And so the question then is, why is this vocabulary series necessary? What is the big deal about this? And so why do students need to study this in the first place? Well, first off, the first very simple answer to this is that they need to build their vocabulary. Again, very simple answer, but very complex at the same time here. We do this because we want to be able to not only raise our SSAT scores, specifically on the exam that we will be taking, but we also want to be able to spend less time on questions. This allows us to think more about the questions ahead. We are able to manage our time wisely instead of just simply sitting there stuck on a question because we don't know the exact word. So simply here, talking about expanding our vocabulary, that is one reason. However, we have a second reason as well. And so if we're talking about the middle level vocabulary, we're also talking about thinking critically about language and also understanding nuance. So specifically here, learning the hidden meanings behind every word that native speakers use day to day. Now, I really want to emphasize this point in particular because when we're usually talking about vocabulary or vocabulary series, learning vocabulary, we oftentimes talk about it in the sense of learning it off of a dictionary or just learning what it actually means, but maybe not actually using it. And so what we want to really focus on here is adding what is nuance, giving context, giving connotations, and also the way that we can understand how this word is used by native speakers. That way, we're not only able to answer the question correctly, but we're also able to think about it in the context that the sentence is giving us, that the question is giving us as well. Being able to pinpoint exactly what they're saying through nuance as well is going to help us clarify a lot of that ambiguity and confusion that we oftentimes see on tests. And for that reason, I would highly recommend the fact that we want to be looking at SSAT middle level vocabulary, particularly this series, as it will cover the way that the nuance is used for each and every single word. Some additional perks that will also be addressed specifically here in this series will be addressing synonym questions in the verbal section of the exam. And so because there are several synonym questions here, oftentimes they are very confusing for a lot of students who might not be aware of all the synonyms. Again, 3,000 synonyms, that is going to aid your student a lot in this endeavor. Additionally, explanations that make the words easier to remember and recall, and word breakdowns with prefixes, suffixes, root words, history, and fun stories. Combining these two, I would just like to state here that we're trying to focus on making this a really good experience for your student. That way, they're not only able to learn it, but also they're able to retain the information as well. For us, it's really important that they're not only going to be remembering the word, but when the time comes where they look at the word, that they'll be able to pick it out and be able to answer the question accurately and precisely. And for that reason, again, entertainment is one big factor in this, making sure that they're able to remember it with word associations and also fun stories that keep us motivated to learn a bit more. So the question there is, who is this lecture for? So here we're going to be talking again about 500 vocabulary words. Definitions included with 6+ synonyms for each word, and additional with 4 sample sentences per. And so a myriad of synonyms that range from the most casual to the most advanced. And so here what I would like to suggest is that we just choose the ones that we need the most. And again, one might be thinking most casual, most advanced. What is this range? Casual might be just words that we tend to say in person, out loud, never in papers. But additionally, when we're talking about most advanced, we might be talking about words that are specifically used for academic papers, or perhaps even the SAT, not the SSAT. And so for that reason, by creating such a broad variety, we're also able to broaden the horizon of the student as well as what they know about English vocabulary. And so giving them this, I would say, variety, this eclectic mix of words, they're going to be able to rely on a lot of other contexts to help them answer these questions. And so this is generally how these lectures will look, oftentimes with a word, talking about the definition, seeing whether or not there's 1 or 2 definitions that we oftentimes see, often denoted with a semicolon here, along with several synonyms, and then a sentence for one slide. Here, talking about the sentence here, along with the next slide where we talk about these other sentences too, I would like to note that oftentimes, as we go over these sentences, we're going to be expressing why it was a good word to use in the first place. What other synonyms are going to be the best ones to use. And so keeping all these nuances and these ideas in mind, we're going to be taking our time and really explaining which word is the best word to use and why is this word being used here in the first place. And so, again, when we're going back to this idea of who is this lecture for, I would like to say that this lecture series is specifically open to any middle school student who would like to be preparing and training for the SSAT through vocabulary. Highly recommended particularly for students who want to start with middle level vocabulary for the SSAT before moving on to the upper level. Again, there is a partner version of this as well, talking specifically about the upper level vocabulary. And so this can be seen as the beginner step or the step that one wants to take so they have a good foundation of 500 words before they move on to the next one, as they will be self-referential. And so that necessity for the course really comes into play here because vocabulary oftentimes we'll hear cover connotations, history, culture, and formality, the way that we use it, the context that we use these words in. And additionally, when we're talking about the exam itself, we can say that it will be applied in all 30 synonym questions, all 30 analogy questions, 40 reading response questions, as well as that essay prompt. And so to put in simple words and to maybe sum this all up, we have this idea. This series will be applicable in 3 out of the 4 parts of the exam. Again, the other part here would be mathematics, but taking that aside, all 3 other parts will be talking about English in some way or another. And so for that reason, I cannot recommend this series enough, specifically talking about the way that vocabulary and language and words can really define our grade, particularly for this exam. And so a little bit about myself, just so we have a little bit more context about me too. I currently am working as a teacher who likes to focus particularly on courses that are designed for overseas students. This can include TOEFL, SAT. I'm also a writing specialist, so talking here about essays as well as university entrance exams and college applications. And so while covering those, I am also somebody who has existed and lived and was born in the United States. I was there my entire life until I went to Korea University for my degree in English language and literature, and then I also graduated there with great honors and a 4.32 GPA. And on top of this as well, I just recently graduated from my master's program, talking here specifically about Carnegie Mellon University's Literary and Cultural Studies program. And additionally, I am currently a PhD student, also studying in the same program, talking particularly about these below subjects, here focusing a bit more on that contemporary American studies. And so at the end of the day, what is the point that we want to take away? It is this. The most important 500 middle-level vocabulary words with thousands of synonyms and sentences for your perusal, for your students' perusal. That way, they will be able to really properly prepare themselves for the test, for the exam, for the questions that will be coming up. And this series particularly is going to make this interesting. It's going to make it fun. We're going to cover a lot of different topics and most importantly, do what most lectures don't. We're going to be talking about nuance. We're going to be talking about connotations. And so with that in mind, thank you so much for listening in and I hope to see you in class soon. Hi, so we're going to be starting off our new lesson series with SSAT middle level vocabulary. So for a lot of us out there, when we're going to start studying for the SSAT, we can kind of see it in two different ways. We have the mandatory words that we'll see here with the middle level, and then some more upper level words that comes in the next section. But let's just go ahead and start with the basics and go alphabetically with the letter A and just kind of start there just so we have a good taste of what it is that we should be looking at when we're looking at SSAT middle level vocabulary. So these are the words for today, and I think it's really important, like always, to kind of say the words along with me. That way we know what the pronunciation is. Here I'm going to be using American English, so please follow along. That way you guys know exactly how to pronounce these words. Abate, abduct, abhor, abolish, abridge, absurd, abyss, accelerate, acclaim, and acute. Now, these are the 10 words we're going to be looking at today, and the first word that we are taking a look at is the word abate. So here, as you can see, this is a verb meaning to decrease in force or intensity, to decrease in value or become defeated. Now, we can see this word taking two separate definitions, but more or less they are the same thing. So when we see the word abate, it means to make lessen or to make less. So we have synonyms such as decrease, diminish, lessen, recede, dwindle, ebb, and relent. Now, out of these words, we might say that abate is not the one that we tend to use. We tend to use words similar to the word decrease, lessen, maybe diminish, but we don't really see the words recede, dwindle, ebb, or relent very often. And this is quite common for students who are using English as a second language, so not a native speaker. But if you can kind of squeeze in these words, that's always really good too. Abate would probably be the more advanced out of all of these, but again, they all mean pretty much the same thing, meaning to decrease in intensity. Here I have a sample sentence, so I waited for the wind to abate before leaving, this meaning that the wind was probably too strong to leave this certain area, and so you are waiting for it to abate. You are waiting for the wind to calm down before you can leave. And a lot of times I would say this is the way that we tend to use this word. Using the word to describe weather tends to be quite a common way of employing it. Here are some other sentences. So I took Laura some homemade cookies, hoping to abate her sadness. So here, Laura is sad, you take her some cookies, and hoping to abate the sadness. Abate, diminish, lessen, recede, ebb her sadness to make sure it goes away, and you try to make her feel better about it. How can I cause feelings of doubt to abate and find confidence? So here, for anybody out there who might want to kind of bolster their spirits, it's important to find confidence, and at the same time, you can't just do that. You also have to abate feelings of doubt. So if you're questioning yourself, you have to make sure that those kinds of thoughts go away before you can truly find any confidence. Lastly, after a few hours of providing heat, the fire's bright flames began to abate. So if anybody has gone camping before, this is something you guys have probably seen. If you see a fire that's burning bright and you don't touch it for a long time, slowly the fire starts to calm down, dwindle away, ebb away, abate. This is one way that we can be using this word in the future if we see something like that. So instead of saying the word dwindle or lessen, abate is a really good synonym to use in those kinds of contexts. The next word is the word abduct. This is a verb as well, to seize and take a person by force away. So one thing I want to note here about the word abduct is this little thing in the parentheses, the fact that it's talking about a person specifically. So the word abduct tends to be used more often in regards to a person taking another person or group, a community, but the thing that is being taken away is not an object, it is a person. And so that's kind of like, I would say, something to just keep in mind when you're using this word. You wouldn't really abduct a pencil from a desk, you would abduct a person instead. Synonyms here would be kidnap, seize, capture, hijack, spirit away, Shanghai, and make off with. Now, some of these you guys are probably familiar with. So the word kidnap, seize, capture, these ones are probably the ones you are more accustomed to. Hijack, you see this word used more often with airplanes. So if somebody is taking an airplane hostage, they might hijack it instead. Spirited away is another way to just say to be moved from one place to another. And then there's make off with. Make off with, I would say, tends to go more aligned with persons, places, and things, specifically items. And Shanghai, this one has a quite interesting etymology. So word history here. It took place in the time of pirating. So that's why the word Shanghai is used. This is very colloquial though, so meaning very casual. Probably wouldn't use any of the last three to write any papers with, but very good words to also keep in mind, because if you hear it, you might not be able to make sense of it unless you know the context that it does mean to abduct. So for the sentence, for the senior prank each year, the current year's seniors abduct the mascot of our most hated rival. So here, mascot of our most hated rival, let's say there's two universities, right? And one university has a mascot of a pirate, saying on the topic of Shanghai. Then you would abduct the pirate costume, maybe the person who's also in the costume, and they are abducting it. Again, a person by force, it's against their will. Here is the picture of the woman who tried to abduct the millionaire's young child. Again, here we're talking about the word abduct, taking, stealing, going away with, spiriting away, a young child. So this is also a person. So we have to think of the word abduct always meaning a person. Periodically abduct your guests and take them to another secret party room. I'm assuming you'd have to be kind of rich to have a secret party room here, but the concept is still the same. Abducting your guests are people. And here's the last one. So he's an alien who needs to abduct a specific number of people before time runs out. Once again, the word abduct tends to mean people as the subject, not really items, okay? So using this word, you might also get the idea that the connotation isn't quite positive. It's quite negative, has a negative definition, used usually quite negatively. And so maybe keeping those items also in mind when you're using this word is good for future use. Then we have the word abhor, which is another verb, to regard with extreme repugnance, to hate or to loathe. And so here, I think this is a really good word. I think the word abhor is absolutely wonderful to use. And it's quite easy to understand. So to hate, to loathe, I don't like it, I hate it, I abhor it. You guys kind of get the idea already. So instead of just simply saying that you hate something, say abhor, say you detest it, you despise it, you execrate it, you loathe it. These are all really good words. Abominate is also a good word to use, but this one has a bit more of a, how should I say, setting related definition. So if you want to use that word, you can, but I would say you want to stick with despise, execrate, or loathe. Detest is really good, but overall, I think abhor is the best. So out of fear of drowning, some children abhor the thought of swimming. So think about it. If you guys don't like swimming and you guys don't like drowning, you guys would abhor the thought of going to the ocean, right? You would hate the idea of having to go swim in the ocean. And so here we can see the word abhor being used in a really good context, making a lot of sense for us as the readers, that if children don't like the idea of drowning, let's say, then they don't want to go swimming. People who seek peace abhor violence. This also makes sense. Usually used in opposites, as you guys can tell. So people who seek peace, calmness, quietude, they will abhor violence. They don't want conflict. They want everything to just stay exactly as it is and not really create any, let's say, rough waves. I abhor the taste of coffee, so much so that I won't go to coffee shops for meetings. So this person hates the taste of coffee so much that maybe they don't even like to go to coffee shops because it smells like coffee. So abhor here again meaning not just dislike, but an extreme amount of hate. I don't understand why so many young people abhor reading. So for me, I kind of get the sentence a little bit here. I don't understand why so many young people hate the thought of reading. Again, it's just a really extreme, very, I would say, strong, embodied way of saying that you don't like something. So if it's a dislike, then maybe use the word dislike. But if you really don't like it, abhor is a really good choice instead. Then the next word is the word abolish. To end the observance or effect of, to completely do away with. Here, I put the word something in parentheses because it's usually to get rid of something as its entirety. So synonyms here would be annul, cancel, dissolve, negate, nullify, null, quash, rescind, repeal, and void. As you guys can maybe Moving on to D, part 1, let's take out our 10 words today and make sure that we can pronounce them correctly before we move on, okay? So, here are the words for today. Deplete, deprive, desolate, destitute, detain, detect, detrimental, devious, devoid, and devour. So these are the 10 words we're going to be looking at. And our first one is the word deplete, okay? And as we're looking at it, it looks like the word delete. And it's about the same. You can see them as the same word pretty much. So deplete is a verb to empty of a principal substance, okay? So to completely get rid of something. Synonyms here are exhaust, devour, expend, burn, sap, lessen, consume, or decrease. So again, to get rid of something in its entirety. Oftentimes it's a principal substance, but it doesn't always have to be a principal substance either. It's just to drain something so much that nothing is left. To protect the ozone layer by taking precautionary measures to control global emissions of substances which deplete it, okay? So we are trying to make sure we are, protecting the ozone layer. So we want to keep this in mind and control global emissions that deplete said ozone layer. Ozone layer, there's only so much of it. It's not going to come back if we lose it pretty much in this instance, okay? So we need to make sure that it is not decreasing to the point where it is non-existent. Now that's another thing too, is the fact that the word deplete, remember, means to the point of non-existence, to the point where the line ends at 0, okay? Completely getting rid of something would be to deplete it. Fans were coming up in the break to rapidly deplete the pile. So fans, maybe they want to get some kind of merchandise, maybe they want to get some kind of poster, but they are depleting the pile, meaning there is nothing left by the end. There is 0, nada. Wind energy does not pollute the environment or deplete resources. This is really good. It doesn't get rid of it entirely. There is no 0 factor when it comes to wind energy. It does not get rid of everything. There is no depleting. The money required can quickly deplete a home buyer's savings account, can quickly bottom out, get rid of to its entirety a homeowner's or home buyer's saving account. So again, to get rid of in its entirety to its fullest extent to make sure that it is completely empty by the time you're done. So that's the word deplete, and that is the power that it has. So meaning, if you're trying to use the word deplete and you use it in the wrong context, if there's something left, you have not depleted it, okay? There has to be nothing left for you to be able to use the word deplete in a correct form, okay? So if I hear somebody say, I depleted my bank account, okay? That means that if somebody were to go in and check, and say, how much money do you have? If there's like maybe $20 or $30, that is not depleting, okay? That number should be 0, and that is considered depleting instead. Then we have the word deprive. This is a verb to take something away from, to withhold something from, okay? So to make sure that somebody can't have something or to keep it away from someone else or something else. Synonyms here are dispossess, strip, divest, relieve, bereave, bear, denude, or rob, okay? So a lot of times we can use the word deprive to say, you have deprived me of my joy, you have deprived me of oxygen, if there's, an issue going down in like a movie where like a boat is sinking or something like that. But another way that we can say it is maybe like depriving you of time and effort, time and energy. Depriving is to make sure that you can't use all of it, to keep you from taking it, to keep you from using it to your own benefit. For some reason, you wish to deprive me of our former relationship or friendship. We used to be really good friends, is what the sentence is saying. But now you are, for some reason, depriving me of it. We used to be good friends, but now you don't pick up my phone calls, you don't text me, you don't chat with me, you don't want to hang out with me. You are depriving me. You are keeping me from, and you're withholding, keeping, us from being friends again. Why is that? That's a really good way to use the word deprive in this kind of context. The princess is too kind to deprive me of the pleasure of spending the evening with you. The princess is too kind to keep me from seeing you. Maybe this guy's a guard, who knows? But saying, hey, like I normally wouldn't be able to, but I have not been deprived of this opportunity. This opportunity has not been kept from me. Just because you are on a diet doesn't mean you have to deprive yourself. This is a very true fact. If you are on a diet, you don't have to keep yourself or withhold yourself from enjoying good food, enjoying good meals, enjoying good vegetables, fruits, other ingredients. Do not deprive yourself. Don't keep it from yourself. As you deprive yourself of sleep, you begin to feel more fatigued. If you keep yourself from sleeping, if you withhold sleeping from yourself, then you will be more tired when you wake up. So as you guys can see, the word deprive means to keep and withhold something. It doesn't have to be by yourself. So again, like these two are talking about don't deprive something from yourself. It can also be from other people as well. So this is generally how this word tends to be used. And I would say that the word deprive uses, the uses are many and comes up quite often. So this one, if you don't already know it, I would say try to get used to using it at the very least, because it is quite a good word to use in casual contexts, and it's not that hard once you start to learn how to exactly use it, okay? So don't keep something from me, don't hold something back from me, don't deprive me of it. It sounds better too. Then we have the word desolate. This is an adjective, devoid of inhabitants and visitors, joyless, barren, lifeless, devoid of warmth, okay? So completely lacking in anything warm, happy, joyous. It is just bleak, okay? So I need you guys to imagine for a second here, okay? Imagine the moon. The moon, there's no water, there's no food, there's a little bit of sunlight, but there's nothing there. It is desolate. No inhabitants, no visitors, no people, nothing. Lifeless, devoid of warmth, joyless, and barren. If there's nothing there, that is the word desolate. So synonyms will be comfortless, darkening, godforsaken, depressing, cheerless, morose, and Plutonian. So out of all these synonyms, which ones are the ones that we want to be taking a look at the most? Well, we have comfortless, meaning there is no comfort. That one we kind of get already. It's pretty simple. Then we have darkening. Godforsaken, that's a really good one. It's a very powerful one. I wouldn't necessarily say to use this in academic writing, but if you hear it, pretty much they're saying like, there is no life, there is no love, there is no warmth. Depressing is pretty good, cheerless is pretty good, morose is very strong, very good word. And Plutonian, as you guys can see, Pluto like the planet, okay, the dwarf planet. If you guys still call it a planet, good for you. If you don't, also good for you. But Pluto as a, sphere that is circling the sun, Pluto is dark. It's desolate. There is no life. It's barren, devoid of warmth. There's no people on it. It's also at the very far end of the solar system. And even that, on top of that, we have it, not being considered a planet. It is desolate. It's so sad, right? It's all the way over there, in space by itself. So the word desolate tends to work really well, and therefore Plutonian, like Pluto, like the planet Pluto, is also a really good synonym. It was a desolate wasteland except for some grazing sheep. So there's nothing there, and there's no one there, except for some sheep that are wandering around eating grass. Pretty sad, not gonna lie. Then we have the word desolate here. The desolate wilderness is bounded only by the distant Red Sea. The wilderness is vast. It is also without life. It is without people, okay? And so when you see words like desolate tied with wilderness, okay, so we have an assumption that there's some kind of life. When they're saying desolate in this kind of situation, they don't mean plants, they mean people, they mean visitors, they mean inhabitants. He may make me feel desolate, make my spirit sink and hide the future from me. He may make me feel sad, joyless, cheerless, no light in my life, very depressed. And so you can also use this word to talk about emotions as well. It doesn't have to be a physical word. So it can mean that there is no warmth, there's no joy, there's no happiness. The city will be left desolate without a single inhabitant. Again, no inhabitants, no visitors, desolate. I feel like that's just like the rule of thumb. If there's no people, you can call it desolate. Anything more than that, no people, no cars, no livelihood, no grass, anything, desolate's also really good to use then, okay? So I would say rule of thumb, if there's people there, you can't call it desolate, but the moment a person is gone, all the people are gone, go ahead and start using the word desolate to explain it. Then we have the word destitute. This is an adjective, lacking something needed or desirable or lacking possessions. If you are destitute, oftentimes this means that you don't have enough to actually fend for yourself and you are lacking. Lacking what? Possessions, food, shelter, water. You are destitute, you are poor, okay? So long story short, the word destitute is just a fancy way of saying the word poor. Synonyms are beggared, impoverished, necessitous. Properly moving on to the letter P, let's look at P part 1 and the 10 words that go along with it. And like always, let's make sure to say these words out loud together. Partial, pathetic, pedestal, pedestrian, pedigree, penetrate, penitent, perceive, perennial, peril. Once more, these are the 10 words for today, and the first one we're going to start off with is the word partial. This is an adjective of or relating to a part rather than the whole, or inclined to one more than the other. Now this word has two separate definitions and they can vary very much in terms of one meaning one thing and the other meaning another. There's not a lot of overlap there. And so in one way we can say partial as one small part of a bigger whole, like a puzzle piece almost, or if we're talking about some kind of cake, if you take a slice out of it, you can say it is partially eaten, it is partially missing. I've taken a partial portion for myself. You can use the word in that kind of sense, or you can use it to mean inclined to more than one more than the other. If I have, strawberry ice cream and I have vanilla ice cream, then I can say I am more partial to strawberry ice cream. I think strawberries taste better. And so I am more inclined to eating one more than the other. And so that's how we have the word partial being used in two different ways with two different kinds of definitions. And we're going to explore both of them here with two examples for each term and their definition with the sentences. And then we'll also have separate synonyms too. And I felt this was important to know both of them because you will see it in both contexts very often. Synonyms for being a part of something are incomplete, fragmentary, or limited. And then we have inclined from one more than the other. We have biased, slanted, prejudiced, partisan, and unjust. And so them being some kind of inclination, some kind of bias, preferring one thing over the other. And then we have, again, partial being something that is incomplete, something that is fragmentary, something that is limited. And so the project in history class may be partial or complete for the draft check. So it might be completely done already, and that could be the draft that you're sending in, so you just have to make some edits, or it could still just be an idea. It is an incomplete, fragmentary, or limited idea that you have. Maybe it's just a rundown of some notes on a piece of paper and you're sending that in. It could be one or the other, and it will still get full marks. Partial here being some part or relating to the whole and the sum, which would be the final project in that history class. It was the partial hair dye job that had my hairdressers confused and baffled. So a partial hair dye job would be, maybe I'm dyeing my hair at home and I run out of hair dye and now I don't know what to do because, half my head looks yellow, the other half looks orange, and it's like split right down the middle and it doesn't make sense, it doesn't look good. And so one can say it is the partial hair dye because I was not able to finish it. I was not able to complete it. And so that's how we see it in one kind of manner, right? This idea of partiality being, some incompletedness, some kind of fragmentariness, some kind of limitation. Then we have, I have to say I am more partial to strawberries than I am to watermelon. This person understands me. I prefer strawberries over most fruits, and so I prefer strawberries to watermelon. I am more biased towards, I have an inclination for, I would prefer to eat one thing over the other. I prefer one thing over the other. And that's how we use it the other direction. His book is, however, inaccurate and grossly partial. So if we're talking about a book being grossly partial, then we're saying, he is not being objective. Now, this is a word that we learned last time, right? Objective. He's not sticking with the facts. He's being very biased. He clearly has a leaning. He's either for or against this guy, whoever he's writing about. But the point is that he's not telling the facts the way they are. He is injecting his own opinion. He is determined by his own personal influence, his bias, his partiality. And so we can use it in this kind of context as well, and it works just fine too. So remember, the word partial has two different definitions, two different sets of synonyms, and two different sentences as well for each one. And so I wanted to really emphasize that here because you run into both of them quite often, and they can be either or. You guys will see them, you guys will be using them. The next word is the word pathetic. This is an adjective, pitifully inferior or inadequate, or sometimes evoking a strong sense of emotion. Oftentimes this emotion is quite negative though, being some kind of pity, being sorry for something. We can also say the word pathetic has that kind of definition too. Synonyms here are miserable, piteous, pitiful, rueful, poor, sorry, wretched, contemptible, lamentable. And so if something's pathetic, you feel really sorry for it, you feel really bad for it. It is inferior or inadequate in such a way that you feel sad looking at it, okay? So imagine, you're going through, the television channels, and this is a very common, I would say, infomercial. It's like a bunch of animals, right, in a bunch of these shelters, and they always say, these dogs need a home, and it pans to a dog and they look really sad, they look really pathetic, they look really pitiful, right? We feel really bad for them, and that's how they get you, because then you feel so bad that you want to take care of them. You want to donate money so you can make sure that they're living a good life, hopefully they get adopted, all those kinds of things. And so it works really well is what I'm saying. But you guys understand what I'm saying there, right? Like these dogs look really sad. They're like, please give me a house, please give me a home. They look very pathetic. For the reason I would say that the synonyms here are really good, I think all of these synonyms are really powerful actually. I would say we really want to be using the word pitiful. We want to say miserable is good. I would say we can go a bit stronger than that. I would say lamentable. We are lamenting it. We're feeling so bad for it. We're crying over it. We're so sorry for it. Lamentable, really, really strong word. For not using the word pathetic, okay? Pathetic also, I want to note, is a bit of a more colloquial or casual word. You'll hear this more in conversation than in papers. And so if we're talking more academically, we will use the word lamentable instead. Announcements on today's weather or anything else over the pathetic sound system were completely inaudible. The sound system is so bad. If we're so sorry to listen to it. It is cracking. We can't hear a single word. And we're just listening to going like, oh, it's giving me a headache. It hurts my ears. We would say that is a pathetic sound system. It's not clear. It's not doing its job. It is inferior and inadequate for the job it's supposed to be doing. The pages fluttered down the hall in a pathetic little snow flurry. And I think this is a really interesting sentence here, but we're thinking maybe, okay, so pages are fluttering down the hall. Fluttering, so somebody must have tossed them, somebody must have thrown them. Maybe it's like flying out of a backpack as somebody runs down the hall. But it's coming down like a little snow flurry. It's falling, right? But it's a pathetic little small, snow flurry. Meaning it might be only a few pages. It might not be a lot of paper, so it doesn't look really grandiose and beautiful. It's just like a few pages like floating here and there, and it's like, oh, okay, it's a bit sad looking, right? Being kind of sad and being inadequate, not really getting the job done, we can call that pathetic. He seemed altogether so thin, small, and pathetic. Here, we're feeling really sorry for him, evoking a strong sense of a sad emotion. That's how we can understand this here. Jason looked like a pathetic dog as he tried to set up his tent in the drenching rain. So if you guys can imagine, a dog that is completely drenched with water, its ears are flat and it's looking up and it looks really sad. Here we can think that this guy kind of looks like that. He's drenched with rain and he's trying to set up a tent and he wants to get dry, but he can't. So he just looks really sad, right? We feel really bad for it. It is pitifully inadequate for what is going on right now. He needs to get somewhere dry. And so that's this word once more. The word pathetic will be used more in casual context, not academic or professional, so be careful with that. I wouldn't necessarily say to use that in conversation very often. I think the word lamentable is stronger if we're talking more academic, okay? The next word is pedestal. This is a noun, the support or foot of a column, a base, or a position of esteem. And so the word pedestal, literally as a noun, is some kind of column, some kind of large, vertical, often made with rock, sometimes carved, kind of structure. We see this a lot with like more ancient civilizations. We might see kind of like a pedestal, like a place for people to stand. And then we can also use that as a metaphor or some kind of symbol where it is somewhere that people will stand, and it's not literally, it's figuratively, it's a metaphor, right? So not someone actually standing on this thing, but they stand there to show that they are powerful, that they have some kind of esteem, that they are noteworthy or notable in some sense. Synonyms are base, support, mounting, platform, pillar, podium, and foundation. I would say platform usually is really good, podium's really good, stage even is pretty solid too. Anywhere that you can say like this person standing here has some kind of influence on others, okay? There's a power dynamic a part of this. And the reason why this word is so good is because we see this in two different ways. We see it being used very literally, And we see it used being very figuratively as well. A spiral stairway leads from the base of this pedestal to the torch. And so it is a literal pedestal, a literal support or foot of a column. So it's like the bottom part. It does not have any pedestal being buried directly into the earth. Again, it's at the base of the column, and so it is buried into the earth. If you guys have ever read Ozymandias by Percy Shelley, then you would know that this is kind of what happens, Moving forward, let's go ahead and move into our new letter, R, and this is R part 1. So like always, let's go ahead and look at those 10 words and say them out loud together. That way we know how to pronounce them. Radiant, ramble, rancid, rapport, rash, raucous, rave, rebuff, recede, and recoil. So the first word we're going to be starting off with is the word radiant. Now radiant here, this is an adjective, vividly bright or shining, marked by love, confidence, or happiness. Oftentimes, when we're using this word radiant, we have this idea of light that comes to mind. Let's look at the synonyms real quick. Shining, illuminated, brilliant, gleaming, ablaze, glowing, glittering, and incandescent. As we can see here, that first definition, vividly bright or shining, something that has to do with light, radiating, something, if there's something that is being radiated, radiation, radiating, radiator, some kind of heat, some kind of warmth, some kind of light. All the synonyms also, therefore, have to have something to do with light, some kind of brightness, some kind of excitement that can be described as either a heat or a visible light of some sort. And when we say radiant in that sense, we can be very technical about it, right? If we're talking about a furnace, you can say it's radiant because it is giving off a type of heat and some source of light. But also when we're using the word radiant as an adjective to describe other people, we're not saying they're literally giving off some kind of light, but that they are marked by some kind of love, confidence, or happiness that makes them look like they're glowing. Okay, it's a very beautiful thing if you're described as radiant. For the synonyms, I would say all of these are pretty good in terms of the word radiant. All I'm going to ask here is that make sure that whenever you're using a synonym that might not be listed here for the word radiant, that you are also keeping that idea of light in mind. If there's no light to it, then it's not going to be an appropriate synonym. In the fire's glow, her face looked radiant with joy and excitement. We have fire's glow, so it's lit up a little bit. Her face is going to be reflecting the heat and the warmth. And also we can say it's radiant with joy and excitement. It is vividly bright or it is vividly shining. You can tell that her happiness is really glowing on her face, and it's very easy to see. My best friend was able to cheer me up with her radiant smile. It's not just a simple smile, it's glowing, it's so bright, it's shining. And you can say that, well, maybe it's like her teeth are really white, but it's also more because she is a very bright person. She's a very happy, excited person, and her smile really represents that. He was radiant when he accepted his diploma from the principal. He graduated. He is filled and overjoyed with happiness, excitement, some kind of jubilation. And so for him in this very moment, he is so happy that nothing can go wrong. Therefore, you can say that he's being very radiant. He is giving off a lot of excitement and happiness, a lot of light and joy. Learning that she had been accepted to her first pick university, she was radiant. She's not just happy, she's so over the moon excited that she is gleaming, she is beaming, she is bright, she is glittering. Her face is showing a lot of excitement and happiness that can also be described as very bright, okay? And so with that being said, that's the word radiant. Remember, light is a very big part of this word. That's why I keep emphasizing it here. And when you're using this word to describe a person, it's a very beautiful word to use. I'm going to also stress that here too. It's not simply the fact that you are giving off some kind of warmth, but it is warmth plus brightness, some kind of lightness, some kind of excitement that really shows, the world isn't so dark after all. And that's how we want to remember this word as we move forward. The next word is ramble. This is a verb to move aimlessly from place to place or to talk in an aimless, erratic, or long-winded way. There are two different definitions for this, and there are two ways that we can understand ramble, because the first ramble is to move from place to place aimlessly. You're not having any goal in mind, and you're just walking. And you're walking without purpose. You're just kind of taking your time with this. And then the second one, ramble, as a different way of understanding it, would be an aimless, erratic, or long-winded, same thing, not having an aim, not having a goal, way of speaking. Okay, so you don't really have an end topic. You're not really getting to the conclusion of your story. You just keep talking. You just keep saying the same thing over and over again. That would be to ramble. Synonyms are saunter, amble, and wander, specifically for moving aimlessly. And then for that second definition, we have gabble, chatter, babble, blither, maunder, and prattle, which means, again, once more, to talk in a very lengthy, not really making a lot of sense kind of way, oftentimes aimless or erratic. They do enjoy exercise and enjoy a ramble in the countryside and through the woods. And so they like exercise, they like making sure that they're healthy and satisfied with their lives, and so they'll go for a very aimless walk, an aimless amble, or maybe a ramble through the woods after they're done eating their dinner. Okay, so here when we're using the word ramble, they're not specifically going to the store, they don't mean to go to a very specific area, they're just gonna walk until they get tired and then they're gonna come back. And that's all it is, right? There's no goal in mind, they're just going for a walk. Tours to suit all levels of availability, from a gentle ramble to a Himalayan expedition. So a gentle ramble, if people just want to look at the sights, but they don't really want to go to a very specific location, there's no very specific landmark they want to visit, then people are allowed to just simply walk around and just go on this trail that loops around in a big circle. Or you can also go up all the way to a Himalayan expedition. There are walking trails and plans for anybody who wants to do any of these different types of levels of ability, okay? It may be necessary to time the speech beforehand to be sure it does not ramble. So here we're talking more about the actual speech part of it. So we've talked about ramble as the walking aimlessly part. What about speaking aimlessly? So it's good to time the speech, read it beforehand, look through it beforehand, to make sure it does not say something in a very long-winded way. It actually gets to a point after a certain point and is not very aimless, okay? So this is what we want to do before we go ahead and stand in front of our classroom and say a speech or do some kind of public speaking project, making sure you do not ramble, that you do not keep talking without an end goal in mind. When I get nervous, I begin to ramble incessantly and pull on my sleeves. When I get nervous, I just start talking in circles, I am aimless, I have no end goal in mind, I am long-winded, and I also end up pulling on my sleeves to show how nervous I get. And so, rambling is a problem for this person, and once more, these two sentences are specifically talking about speaking as a long-winded exercise, and the other two sentences before it are talking about rambling as an aimless walking exercise. Okay, and so that's how we can see this word being used in two different scenarios. And so I would say it's very specific in terms of context, like you would not be using the other definition in terms of a sentence if it's structured a specific way. So I wouldn't worry about, accidentally using the wrong definition and trying to emphasize which one you're trying to say more. And I don't think that's going to be a problem with this one. Then we have rancid. This is an adjective having an unpleasant smell or taste from chemical change or decomposition. Oftentimes if something is rancid, it means it's gone bad, it's rotting, it's too old, it's expired. That's how I would say that we use this word the most. If we're talking chemical compound change, that might be because it's rotting, but oftentimes rancidness and rancid taste, rancid smells, come from something rotting. So something, again, going through decomposition. Synonyms are putrid, rank, fetid, tainted, moldy, stale, sour, contaminated, and malodorous. I would say rancid specifically is used more in terms of taste than it is smell, but it is one or the other, if not both. Taste over smell, I would say we use it more for taste. I would say all of these words are actually really good, but we're talking more about the actual smell itself. And so contaminated, pretty simple, but we want to see how disgusting it can actually be. So contaminated and malodorous, I would say those two, maybe not the best ones. Still really powerful, but probably not for this word specifically. Putrid, rank, fetid, tainted, moldy, stale, and sour, all really good descriptors to show how disgusting or how rotten something is in terms of smell or taste. So that first row, all really good words to use and really, really powerful in terms of imagery. If you guys know what it smells like to smell rotten food, then you know it's like really sour and it hurts your nose. So any of those words would work. Sarah scrunched up her face as if she smelled something rancid. And so, if you smell something really bad, your face just kind of crinkles a little bit. And so here, smelling something rancid, smelling something really bad, smelling something that smells as if it had rotted or is rotting. Keep milk refrigerated as it turns rancid quickly when left out in the heat. This is why it's really important to, not get food poisoning during the summer. If milk has been left out for too long, it will start to curdle, it will start to go rancid, it will start to decompose, and it will start to rot. And so, because of that, you don't want to be putting it out in the sun because it goes really bad really easily. The camp smelled of years of rancid grease and wood smoke. So it's sour, it's unpleasant, it stinks really bad, it smells like it's rotting, and it's so much of it too that once you step into it, you can smell it from a mile away. Once again, rancid grease, decomposing or rotting. The rancid, sour smell of rotting food wafted up from the large garden. Properly moving on to S part 1, let's look at the 10 words for today, and let's study them out together like we always do. Scanty, scoff, scour, scowl, scrawny, scrupulous, secular, seep, seethe, semblance. Now we're going to go ahead and start off with our first word, which is the word scanty. This is an adjective meaning limited or less than sufficient in degree, quantity, or extent, okay? And the synonyms for this are meager, skimpy, spare, sparse, modest, minimal, insufficient, deficient, or paltry. And one thing I want us to really keep in mind with the word scanty here is that the word scanty oftentimes describes something that is inanimate, okay? We are very rarely going to talk about the word scanty in terms of a person, and often we will see the word scanty being used to describe things that can be counted, okay? So if we can count it on our fingers, however many fingers we have, but if we can count it and put a number to it, we might say the word scanty, okay? And so those are just a few little tidbits that I'm going to say right now because it does come up later, and I'm going to touch back on this when we get to a different word. Other than that, though, let's just go straight into the sentences here. Rain in the lower zone is scanty, and from May to January does not occur. So here, scanty, very little, it's very small, it's minimal, it's insufficient, and it's also maybe modest, maybe it's sparse, it's skimpy, it's meager. There's not a lot of it. There's little quantity to it. And the reason why I say that we can count this is because if we have rain, we can count rain. By how much? By oftentimes how much rain is falling from the sky. We can measure it by volume, right? How many millimeters is going to fall from the sky. For in America, we can say that, there's going to be 5 inches of rain, 2 inches of rain. And so we can kind of measure it in a certain sense. And so that is what I mean by scanty oftentimes is an adjective that describes something that you can also count, but is a limited amount of. The flora of Nevada, although scanty, varies greatly according to its location. So the flora of Nevada, the plants that exist in Nevada, there aren't that many. There's not a lot of them. It's very limited. Varies greatly according to where it is. And so you might see a few variations here, you might see a few variations there. There's not a lot of them, but they're greatly various depending on the area you go to. Outside the walls are the scanty ruins of 2 ancient temples. And so if we're saying the ruins of 2 ancient temples, we have some kinds of, building blocks, some kind of creation out there, some kind of man-made monument, but we have them as scanty ruins, meaning they are small, they are probably very minimal or limited, they're sparse, they may have been eroded over time, maybe some of it's buried under the sand, but regardless, only a few bits of it are left for us to take a look at and appreciate. And lastly, the population is very scanty, yet the economy of the city is surprisingly robust. So here we're saying that this population is very small, it's limited, it's very sparse, there's not that many people here. Notice though how I'm saying scanty is, not necessarily just used to describe people. I'm talking about individuals specifically. Population is something that we can count, right? How many people are in a community? This is not talking specifically about a human and their, identity, their characteristics, but rather, the amount of them, the actual number of how many people are living in an area. And so this still applies, okay? So the word scanty oftentimes will be defining something that is not necessarily living, and even if it is, we're not talking about the fact that they're living, we're talking about the amount there is, or perhaps the quantity. And so just keep that in mind as we move on towards the future. Again, scanty being very minimal or small. Then we move on to the word scoff. This is a verb to express scorn, derision, or contempt. The scoff itself is like a gasp or like a sigh or almost like an intake of a breath that is meant to show that you are upset or aggravated in some way, like like that kind of thing would be a scoff. And so here synonyms are mock, deride, ridicule, dismiss, belittle, taunt, tease, make light of, or poke fun at. If we're scoffing at something, it doesn't have to be a literal scoff either. We are just expressing some kind of scorn, derision, or contempt. We don't like it, then we're just going to scoff at it. Scoffing at it here could just be the breath that I was talking about earlier that I demonstrated, or it could actually be just words too, that you're not liking it, so you mention it, and it's kind of snarky. It has attitude to it. You know, your parents would be upset if you did this to them, that kind of thing. The tone of the magazine writer is that of a person who can't help but scoff at current fashion trends. And so this person who is unable to help themselves from scoffing at current fashion trends might sound something like, oh my goodness, they're going to wear that belt with that shirt? Ridiculous. As if that's going to catch on. That would be very similar to scoffing at a fashion trend. And so here, that's how we can understand that, right? Some kind of derision, some kind of mocking, making fun of, poking fun at, and kind of making it less than it actually is. Fans will scoff at this option, but it now means that anyone can play American football. They're going to scoff at the fact that you don't have to have some kind of formal trainings. You don't have to have, a very specific regiment or a coach or some kind of diet to be a professional American football player, let's say. If you can qualify, then you can, partake in it. And, fans will scoff at this option. They're going to say, what? That means anybody can do it. That's going to ruin the game. They're going to make fun of it. Let us not scoff at the idea that maybe there is life out in the universe. So let's not make fun of, let's not, joke or, deride, say some offensive things about the fact that maybe there's like aliens out in the universe. This is what the sentence is saying. And then many average pet owners still scoff at the idea of sweatering up their cat for the winter. And so, oftentimes pet owners take one of two sides. It's okay to put clothes on a dog or a cat. It's not okay to put clothes on a dog or a cat. And so some or many average pet owners will still scoff at it. It's like, I'm going to put my cat in a fur, sweater. But they have fur already. Why would I do that? They're just walking around with more fur. They make a joke out of it. They're laughing at it. They're not taking it seriously. Oftentimes, they're looking down at it. Again, that's how we would see the word scoff being here. And so it's actually one of two things. It's either a very physical, breathy motion of saying like, oh, I don't like that. Or it can be some kind of way to express that you dislike something, oftentimes to make fun of, and this can be some kind of words or some comments or phrases that would also count as scoffing. Then this leads us to the word scour. Scour is a verb, and this word has two specific definitions, and so stay with me for a second. First one is to rub hard with rough material in order to clean something, or to move about quickly, especially in search of something, okay? So to scour, in terms of the first definition here, rubbing hard with a rough material to clean would be like me getting a very tough brush, right? And I have to clean the floor. And I'm not just going around, gently wiping stuff down. No, I'm like putting effort into the floor, making sure I get all the dirt off of it. That would be me scouring it, right? I'm putting a lot of effort. I'm doing really hard motions. I'm being very rough with it. The material I'm using, it has bristles, right? It's not soft, it's not a towel, it's very harsh. And so me trying to clean with that, I would say I am scouring the bath tiles. That would be one way of looking at it. To move about quickly, especially in search, we might say scouring the globe, scouring the room. We are quickly, like very fast, shuffling through our stuff, looking over the pillows, looking under the pillows, under the bed, over the blanket. We're running around trying to find something before we head out. We are scouring. Synonyms are, for the first definition, scrub, cleanse, shine, burnish, wipe, clean, and wash. Then for the second definition, we have search, comb, ransack, and mine. Okay? And I would say these are all pretty good for the word scour, but at the end of the day, I think the word scour is the best for both of these definitions, okay? So even though we have all these synonyms work. To scour something with rough material, clean something with rough material, that kind of is the only word that has that kind of connotation to it. And then for that second one, so quickly searching for something, I would say search, comb, ransack, and mine doesn't have that speediness to it. We might say ransack, but it sounds like if we're ransacking something, we are doing it, without permission, that we are not, looking through our own stuff, but we are looking through somebody else's stuff. The spam harvesters that scour the web looking for email addresses always find mine. So that always hunt the web. They're searching through the web. They're trying to get as many emails as they can. Spam callers, spam harvesters, the people who send out like, click on this link, you just won a free cruise, things like that, right? They scour the web. They go and clean it through. They clear it out. They try to figure out all the emails they possibly can by searching on websites. Still, it will save you having to scour secondhand sellers for spare parts. Same thing here, so searching vigorously with a lot of activity, very quickly trying to look for something, scouring secondhand sellers. And then we have the word as it means, cleaning here in the second half. Do not scour the delicate finish as it may cause it to prematurely rust. Don't go in with it, with some kind of bristly, hard material and try to scrub it all off. Then you're going to take off. Congratulations, now you've made it onto the letter T, and here we are with T part 1. And let's go ahead and do this right from the first time. 10 words, let's see how they're pronounced as we read them together. Tactful, taint, tangible, tantamount, taper, tarnish, task, tedious, tempest, and tenacious. These are the 10 words we're going to be looking at today, and the first word is the word tactful. Now this is an adjective meaning having or showing a sense of what to say or do to have good relations or to avoid offense. Here, the way that we can really remember the word tactful is to be polite, having manners, having a good sense of self, and also knowing how to read a room. So say for instance, you are expected to be a little bit tactful. If you're in a room with people you haven't met before, then you probably want to introduce yourself. Say something about yourself that nobody knows there and say hello to others. Make sure that they also have an opportunity to introduce who they are. Things like that, keeping things, with good relations, having a good relationship going around all over. That is what it means to be tactful. And so synonyms are diplomatic, judicious, discerning, courteous, considerate, sensitive, and thoughtful. So oftentimes thinking about the other person, making sure that the other person, let's say, feels safe or feels comfortable enough to actually have a conversation with you or be a part of the group. And so here we can also notice that there are 2 words that are a little bit different than the rest, diplomatic and judicious. I would say that these 2 words are probably the more professional way of saying the word tactful, especially if you are in some kind of conference or some kind of meeting with, maybe government bodies, some kind of political, meeting or committee meeting. Then we might use the words there. Diplomatic and judicious would work at that point very well. Other than that, though, if it's, just kind of a meeting between friends at a party, being tactful would be the way to say that then. Soccer players are advised to be extremely tactful during press conferences. This is really important for a lot of soccer players because it's important that they are tactful to the people who are asking questions, making sure that they are saying the correct answers, being nice, being courteous, saying good things about the team, saying good things about the coach. That way there's still a feeling of camaraderie or some kind of friendship or teamwork that is behind the scenes as well. And so to maintain that, it's important to be tactful in those kinds of scenarios. He was really a very tactful young man indeed in a natural sort of way. And so tactful young man, we can say that this person is giving him a compliment. If you are a tactful person, it means that you are aware of other people's feelings and what to do, what not to do, and keeping that in mind. And so here, tactful, really, really positive. He's never threatening, but he's not exactly tactful sometimes, regretfully. And so here we can also notice that the word tactful does tend to take on a more positive context and connotation. He's never threatening, which is good, but he's also not that tactful, regretfully. And so, putting it in between never threatening, but also regretfully, he's not that tactful, we can see here that we wish that he was a little bit more courteous, a bit more considerate towards others in those kinds of more public or sociable scenarios. He listened to us and was clear in the most tactful way about what he would advise. And so was very clear in the very tactful way, in a very most tactful way, meaning he's very polite about it. He understands that maybe not everybody's on the same page as him, but he's going to do this properly, he's going to do it correctly, and he's going to do it, most importantly, very friendly. And so, tactful here, tactful way, we can also say diplomatic way. Maybe this would be a really good word to use here if there's some kind of decision that needs to be made, right? So if there's, some people people who wants to do one thing and some people who wants to do another thing, he can take it in a very tactful way or a very diplomatic way and see which one would be the best option, or if there's a third option that we can choose. So again, the word tactful means to be considerate of others and taking other people into mind. Really good adjective to use, very, very positive, and diplomatic and judicious are probably the best two synonyms out of there if you want to use it in a professional context. Then we have the word taint. This is a verb to contaminate morally, to touch or affect slightly with something bad. Now, we're going to come up against another word later that's very similar to taint, but I just want to note here that taint is probably a bit more broad than this other word that we're going to mention. Synonyms are pollute, blight, befoul, tarnish, smear, blemish, damage, corrupt, defile, and sully. So to taint something very simply is to damage something or to ruin something, but not to the extent that it is annihilated or obliterated. It's not completely destroyed, but rather it has been besmirched in some small way, like something has gone wrong in a very tiny, particular way. So for instance, if I am wearing a white shirt and I go out to eat with my friends and we're eating something that tends to be, very red in color, and I get some on my shirt, then I have tainted my shirt. I haven't destroyed it completely. It's not like I took my shirt and I dumped it in the food. No, but it is tainted. It is still ruined in some way, but in a very small way. And so that's how we can use the word taint there. The spy snuck into the enemy city to taint its water supply. So here we're not getting rid of the water supply. We're not going to destroy the water supply. We're going to mess with it a little bit. We're going to put something in the water, or we're going to break one small thing, one small factor, a part of it that's going to ruin it very slowly, very gradually. And it's a very small change that has now ruined everything else. And so that's how we say the word taint. Oftentimes if we're going to say taint though, we're actually mixing something in some manner. And so that connotation might stick with it if you're going to be using this word. The spilled chemicals work to taint the experiment, forcing the students to start over. So you're at a table, you're doing some kind of experiment, and then somebody accidentally knocks over some chemicals. Now all the chemicals have mixed, and now you can't get the reading that you want. And so what happens? Because the material has been tainted, because whatever it was that you were using has now been slightly ruined, now you have to start all over again. Don't taint your soil by using the wrong fertilizers. So here, don't mess it up, don't ruin it, don't do anything bad to it by using the wrong material that you shouldn't be using. And lastly, the scandal would forever taint his reputation and ruin his chance for re-election. So here, when we're talking about tainting somebody's reputation, this is going to be a verb that I say would show up a lot with the word reputation. Tainting somebody's reputation, ruining someone's reputation. It's going to be used quite similarly to that. So tainting a reputation means that you have some kind of attitude or persona that you carry with you at all times. This is how people know you. That is the reputation that you carry. If you are tainting a reputation, it means that the way that people will know you forever onwards is going to be ruined by some small factor. You're a wonderful person, you're a really great father, but there's something that you did in your past that has ruined that and has changed our perception of you entirely. And so here, that scandal is what it is that is tainting this reputation. And so that with the word taint, the way that we see it in these sentences here, that's how we're going to be using it. Again, a word comes up later that is very similar to this. I don't know if you guys caught it, but it was in the synonyms. We're going to be talking about that, and that one is a little bit different to this, okay? Then we have tangible. This is an adjective capable of being perceived, especially by the sense of touch. Now, if something is tangible, it just means that you can feel it. You can interact with it physically, and that is probably the best way to describe it. I can see this remote. It is tangible to me. I can grab it, I can click on its buttons. In the same way that if I had an eraser or some chalk, I could feel it, I could touch it, I could interact with it. So if it is a physical object that I can interact with, it is considered tangible. If it is not something I can physically touch, right? If I can't actually feel it on my hands or on my skin, it is not considered tangible. Synonyms are perceptible, sensible, palpable, appreciable, ponderable, and touchable. I would say out of all of these synonyms, the word, I think palpable is the best one. Palpable being like a thing that you can actually feel or experience. Palpable is the best. And then I would say maybe touchable, but this one's a bit easy. I would also say perceptible and sensible are pretty good too, but they're not very specifically talking about the actual touch or the feel aspect of experiencing something. And so those two I would say are a bit more general. They're not wrong, but they are a bit more loose in terms of that definition. I put less hope in tangible things, but in thoughts and words. So I put less hope in things that I can actually touch and feel. I put more hope in things that I can think about and say and the words that I have. Okay, so I am putting more value on the things that I cannot actually see than the things that I can see. The characters were as tangible as all of us standing in this room. So the characters were as real, as, experienceable. I could actually go up to them, I could touch them, I could shake their hand, I could give them a hug. As all of us standing in this room, if there's a bunch of me's standing in a room, then, if I can interact with them, it's more real than that, or as real. And some people enjoy tangible gifts while others would rather spend time with friends. So here, I am one of these people. I would much rather spend time with my friends than get anything tangible. I think that tangible gifts are really nice, but for me, I think that, that experience is better than perhaps getting a stuffed animal, something I can hold, something I can touch. It's not as important to me as it is quality time. And there was controversy about who the man's tangible possessions would go to. And so here, when we're talking about tangible possessions, we're not talking about, the idea of some kind of right or some kind of maybe passed down generational,